comes to the sidelines with his team answering the bell one last time on defense.
Live from our Seton Hill University studios, this is Westmoreland on the Gridiron on the Westmoreland Sports Network. Here's your host, Sean Meyers.
We welcome you into another playoff edition of Westmoreland on the Gridiron here on the Westmoreland Sports Network, 7 p.m. Wednesdays. Sean Meyers, Dan Flickinger coming to you for what might be the final time this year. We're going to have to wait and see based on how our teams do on Friday. And Flick, we got a lot to get to tonight. We have three interviews, the three Westmoreland County coaches that still remain in the WPIAL playoffs. We will hear from Ron Prady of Greater Latrobe, Matt Humbert of Bell Vernon area, and Roger Beitel of Ligonier Valley. And yet we were hoping we were going to hear from a lot more. It's a disappointing first week of the playoffs for Westmoreland County teams. They went just 2-8 overall, including a couple of pretty significant upsets. GCC, the Centurions, the number 3 seed in the 1A bracket, stunned by Rochester, and Woodland Hills upsetting Franklin Regional, another number 3 seed in the 5A bracket. Overall, I thought it was a pretty disappointing showing for Westmoreland County.
Yeah, I agree. And I thought there were some toss-up games coming into this week, like Penn Trafford and Pine Richland, I thought was a toss-up game. East Allegheny and Mount Pleasant thought was a toss-up game. But I thought for sure, well, you can never say for sure in sports, but I had a really good feeling that Franklin Regional was going to beat Woodland Hills, and look what happened. And I did think for sure that Greensburg Central Catholic would at least get by the first round and beat Rochester, but obviously that didn't happen either. And it made me think back a few years ago. I know Rochester upset Jeanette. I think that was in 2016 or 2017 or something in the first round. So, I mean, that program certainly, I guess, you can never count them out of a playoff game. But boy, was that game shocking to see the final. And again, not just the GCC lost, but it didn't take like a last-second play or anything. I mean, Rochester dominated the game. They were more physical than GCC, and they had a huge second quarter. They were able to run the ball very effectively, control the ball a little bit, and take advantage of some Centurion penalties once they got behind. So that was certainly shocking. I know we'll get into these games a little bit more, Sean, but just an initial takeaway, again, few toss-up games, but the games that I thought that the Westmoreland County teams were going to win, neither of those games, Franklin and then GCC, it didn't happen.
Yeah, and everyone understands the reality, and football, it's even more extreme than a lot of the other sports, because in some of those sports, multiple teams get into the state playoffs, and so you have a chance for second life that way. That's not the case in football. The only teams that get in are the ones who win the WPIAL championship, which means if you get bounced early in the playoffs, it almost feels like the regular season is for naught. And so Franklin Regional, Greensburg Central Catholic, those teams, they have a lot to celebrate. Mount Pleasant area as well. They all had home playoff games, and yet really nothing to show for it. So it's a really disappointing end to the season, and it just feels like, those teams, they would want one more chance to go back and play again. But unfortunately, that's how this single elimination playoffs works in football, is you lose and your season is over very abruptly.
Abruptly is the great word for it, because, again, as you mentioned, if there was an opportunity for state playoffs, you're at least kind of keeping one foot in the water, if you will, saying we might get a chance to play again. We might get a chance to redeem ourselves. We see that in
basketball and basketball, baseball.
Yeah.
Right.
But that's not the case in football, unfortunately. And, these teams had a lot of expectations going into the playoffs. Certainly GCC. I mean, hey, we were at training camp. We heard them break during practice by saying state champs or whatever. And then they get knocked out, in the first round. I mean, that has to be extremely upsetting for Marco Thomas and, the entire team, knowing that they had an opportunity there to compete at least for a WPIAL championship, thinking maybe them and Bishop Canavan, but it didn't happen. And then, Franklin Regional, we mentioned on the show last week that maybe their momentum was killed a little bit, losing to Penn Trafford in overtime. But I had thought that, hey, first time hosting a playoff game for a long time, and you get that opportunity, and I just thought that emotion would come back and they'd kind of forget about last week. And I'm not saying that last week played a role, we don't know, in Friday, but can't say it didn't either. The way that they played, I mean, 0 points, They had some opportunities. They put a few drives together, missed field goal by our boy, Joey Bain, Aiden Hudock with a long kickoff return in the game. And you're thinking, okay, here we go. And Franklin couldn't score off of the kickoff return. I think that was actually the missed field goal. And they also had a fumble at midfield. Maybe that drive, turns into points. We don't know. So they did have some opportunities, but they really just couldn't finish off any drives. And it was pretty surprising because I thought that, even though Woodland Hills came in with a lot of momentum after that win against Penn Hills, I thought Franklin would certainly perform better than that. And it's just funny to think, Sean, that, we were there when Penn Trafford and Woodland Hills played early in the season, and Penn Trafford blew them out. And I know it's a different Woodland Hills team. I get it. They got better during the year, but it's just crazy to think, that was the case. And now look where Woodland Hills is.
Yeah, and I think if I recall correctly, there was just 3 teams remaining in Westmoreland County after the first round last year as well. Now, we know 2 of those teams made it to the championship round, Penn Trafford and Bell Vernon area. Obviously, the Warriors won the WPIAL championship, went on to win the state title. But now you look at the 3 teams left, and Bell Vernon has not played a game yet, so we knew that they were going to be around for this second week of the playoffs. They feel like, obviously, the best hope. And then it's going to have to be a couple more upsets for the other Westmoreland County teams, Greater Latrobe and Ligonier Valley, to ultimately make a run to the championship. It's
crazy to think, like, if this was, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, and we said, hey, there are, in 5 years from now, there are going to be 3 Westmoreland County teams left in the WPIAL playoffs. Can you guess who those teams are? If we could take the, time machine back. And, Bell Vernon would be obviously a good guess, but Ligonier Valley and Latrobe, and nothing to take anything away from
Trafford and Jeanette.
Yeah, I'm not taking anything away from those teams, but it's more like, wait, what happened to Penn Trafford? What happened to Jeanette, like you just mentioned? Heck, even Derry back then, was doing really well. So it's just crazy to think that these are the teams that are left. But hey, you can't take anything away from them. What a thrilling win for Latrobe. I know we'll talk about it in a little bit. And then Ligonier Valley taking care of business with a WPIAL playoff win. Congratulations to them. That was really cool to see.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to hear from the 3 remaining head coaches, as I mentioned, Ron Prady, Matt Humbert, and Roger Beitel. We're going to break down all of the brackets as well, look at the games that were decided this past week and what it means for the next round of the playoffs. But first, let's kind of go back to one of our favorite segments, and that's the top performers. So these are the top passers, rushers, and receivers across the entire WPIAL, and then exclusive to Westmoreland County, the top performers as well. So from the first week of the WPIAL playoffs, and yes, it's a much smaller field than when we did this during the regular season, but we still had some big performances. The top passer with 351 yards, Shy Newby of West Mifflin. It came against Westmoreland County's Southmoreland, 9 of 9 for 351 yards. What an incredible performance for the Titans quarterback and leading them to a lopsided victory. The top performer in Westmoreland County, it came in a loss for Conlon Green of Penn Trafford, 13 of 27 for 194 yards. Hayden Kiefer of Southmoreland went 13 of 26 for 153. Colt Chatfield of Mount Pleasant, 12 of 25 for 144 yards. Daniel Dozer of Monessen also had 144 on 10 of 19 passing. And Tyree Turner of Greensburg Central Catholic, 11 of 17 for 129 yards. The top rusher in the WPIAL, person who's been on this list multiple times, Mapletown's Landon Stevenson, 294 yards in the Maples' surprising victory in the first round of the playoffs. Behind him, 200 yards on the ground, the top Westmoreland County rusher was Hayden Siraki of Ligonier Valley, guiding the Rams to a triumph. Robbie Labuda of Mount Pleasant area goes for 193. Tyvon Kershaw of Monessen, 150 yards on the ground. Lane Golkowski of Mount Pleasant, 128. And Trey Wetzel of Southmoreland, 109 yards. And the top receiver across the WPIAL in the first week of the playoffs, Bobby Fadden of Mohawk, 11 catches, 165 yards. There was no Westmoreland County receivers to go over 100 yards in the first week of the postseason. So, Flick, we started last week with the 6A bracket, And we don't need to do it again because nothing's changed. They played no games. Again, it was all buys this week. So it'll stay North Allegheny hosting Canon-Mac, Mount Lebanon hosting Central Catholic. Those will take place this Friday. Let's now look at the 5A bracket. And unfortunately, a couple of Westmoreland County teams were eliminated in 5A. Number 1, Bethel Park sneaks past number 8 North Hills. This gives an idea of how competitive this entire 5A bracket was. The number 1 seed beats the number 8 seed 19-17. So the Blackhawks move on to the semifinals. They will go against number 5 Upper St. Clair, 21-14 victory at number 4 Gateway. So the Gators eliminated from the postseason. On the other side of the bracket, the two teams that we're going to focus on, Penn Trafford falls to Pine Richland 31-17. So the second seeded Rams move on. Number 7 Penn Trafford season is done. And third seeded Franklin Regional at home, upset by Woodland Hills 21-0. The sixth seeded Wolverines move on. So Pine Richland will play Woodland Hills. That game will take place at Gateway High School Friday, and Bethel Park will play Upper St. Clair. That will take place at Cannon McMillan. Remember, the championships in 5A will take place a week earlier than 1A through 4A. It will be at Norwin High School Saturday, November 19th. So we mentioned Penn Trafford eliminated, and Flick, I know you were following that game closely. It looked like there was maybe a miracle comeback in the works for PT that came up just shy. But unfortunately for them, really offensively, they couldn't get anything going until the fourth.
They couldn't get anything going, and they really couldn't slow down Pine Richland a whole lot either. Ryan Palmieri, who, we saw play last year against Penn Trafford, and even though PT won that game, he had a good game against them. And John Ruane identified him when you spoke with him last week. I mean, he's just so good. He started the year quarterback, and now he is moving positions, running back. He split him out at wide receiver, and he's just a force, man. I think that position change really helped Pine Richland. They kind of took off from there. Again, he just wasn't stopped. But you can just never count out Penn Trafford. I mean, it was 24-3, and I literally was like, all right, let's see what Latrobe's doing. Even though I was trying to keep tabs on that game at the same time and all the other games, but I just kind of thought the game was over. Penn Trafford scores to make it 24-10, and go figure, they get the ensuing onside kick. I swear, Penn Trafford is the best team in the WPIAL recovering onside. It doesn't matter who the kicker is either. They seem to recover every onside kick, whether it's to begin a half, a game, or they actually need one at the end of a game. So they recover the onside kick, score again to make it 24-17, and there was enough time left. I can't remember exactly how much time, around maybe 2 minutes or so. Another onside kick, and they came this close to recovering it again. As a matter of fact, John Ruane was like signaling, like, we got it, and Pine Richland clearly did come up with it, but it wasn't clear at first. I mean, there was a scrum for it, and the Pine Richland kid came out with the football, and then Pine Richland took it and scored. Which
kind of surprised me. Yeah, because you were giving me sort of step-by-step updates on it. I figured once Pine Richland recovered, that's kind of the game there.
Yeah, and then you look at the final score, you're like, wait a second. But you know what would have been really interesting, and obviously we're never going to know, but I have a feeling like if PT recovers that onside kick and they score, they're going for 2. There is no way John Ruane kicks the extra point to tie the game and send it to overtime, because they couldn't stop Pine Richland. And when you're down 24-3 and you get a chance to win the game on one play, really, I bet they would have went for 2. Obviously, we'll never know. But really, you got to congratulate the PT kids for making the playoffs again this year and doing so in thrilling fashion with the win against Franklin, and then certainly also what they accomplished last year, those that were on the team. So, yeah, I mean, Pine Richland was just a little bit too much for them on Friday.
And we mentioned Franklin Regional, just kind of a stunning score in this one. Now, if you would have said they lost to Woodland Hills, I'm thinking, okay, it's 35-31, something like that. I believe when I was doing my write-up, the weekly preview of all the games, I had mentioned in there, Franklin Regional had the highest scoring offense in all of 5A. And there's some good teams in 5A. They had scored more per game than anyone else. And then to get shut out at home, just stunning. And we were going through the top performers. How many times did we hear Roman Sarnik, Zach Bazuska, Aiden Hudock? I feel like those three were on there almost every single week. It never materialized. And it's kind of a stunning outcome. And you have to credit Woodland Hills, a team that, again, we saw them early in the season. They got their doors blown off at Penn Trafford. Tim Bostard, obviously, this is a team 3A in terms of enrollment size, opted to play up 2 classes, and now it looks like it turned out to be the right decision. But, man, that's a tough one for Coach Getsy and crew, because it did feel like this was kind of a year where Franklin Regional is making a statement that they're back among the contenders, and now you have to wonder, are they going to be able to reload after losing some really good players like Sarnik and Bazuska?
Yeah, really tough one to swallow. Certainly silver lining is Aiden Hudock will be back, but like you mentioned, Sean, they got to develop some other playmakers on that side. And, Aiden really wasn't a huge factor in the game. You give credit to Woodland Hills for not allowing him to be, other than the long kickoff return that I mentioned earlier that did set up Franklin Regional with good field position, but they couldn't capitalize on it. I don't know if, and again, I have no idea, but I know Zach Bazuska was banged up, the last few weeks. Was he 100%? You don't know. A couple of big plays certainly hit by Woodland Hills. They had
Scoop
yes.
Smith. Yep.
Yes, it was Cam Walter to Scoop Smith. 44 and 68-yard passing plays. Yeah, so there were some big passing plays hit against Franklin, but again, I mean, they controlled the football for good portions of time during the game. Franklin did, but they just couldn't, finish off those drives with touchdowns. And when I say finish off drives, it's not as if they were getting down to the goal line either. So, I guess you just tip your cap to Woodland Hills, but it was interesting that Lance Getsy said after the game that they weren't physical enough. Woodland Hills was more physical than them, and I thought that's what Franklin really has prided itself on all year, is that physical play, running downhill with Sarnik and Bazuska, but I don't know. I guess Woodland Hills came out, had a lot of momentum from the win against Penn Hills, and had a lot of confidence.
And final thought on 5A, and this doesn't necessarily mean it was always the case all season long, but when you get to the playoffs, you have a tendency to look at how did particular conferences fare. The Big East,
not very well.
Not only does Franklin Regional lose, not only does Penn Trafford lose, but Gateway falls as well. So the Big East, which got 3 teams in because of the wild card, goes 0-3. And so now you're wondering, maybe just the conference as a whole wasn't as good as maybe we thought. Now, there's a lot of games that prove that that was a good conference. Obviously, Gateway had some pretty impressive wins this season. We mentioned Penn Trafford blew out Woodland Hills, but yet when it gets to the playoffs, that conference just unfortunately every team from it now eliminated in 5A. The
one thing I would say to that, and I do agree with you, I think people kind of forget sometimes that the playoffs started in 5A and quarterfinals. So it's not as if everybody in that conference lost a first round game where they're, playing against a 16 seed or
right.
whatever. I do think that's worth at least considering, but you're right. I mean, still all 3 teams lose in the first game of the postseason. And the Gateway game, did it not go down to the wire? I think Upper St. Clair threw a late second touchdown pass.
No, and that's the thing about 5A is that these were all really good games. I mean, the biggest blowout was Woodland Hills 21-0 over Franklin Regional. They were all competitive as we thought they would be, because there's been a lot of parity in that classification this year. Well, I think you could say the same about the 4A bracket. So let's now look at how that one played out. Aliquippa, number 1 seed, they got a bye. They will face number 8 Montour as the Spartans edged Hampton. Talk about good games. Number 8 defeats number 9, 34-33. So Aliquippa against Montour. That will be played at Freedom Area High School on Friday. Number 4, Armstrong makes quick work of 13-seeded Blackhawk, 39-7. Caden Olson doing again for the Riverhawks. They move on to the quarterfinals, where they will face number 5 McKeesport. The Tigers blew out number 12 Mars 43-0 in favor of McKeesport. So Armstrong hosting McKeesport on Friday. On the other side, number 2 Central Valley got a bye. They will face number 7 Laurel Highlands. Rodney Gallagher led the Mustangs to a victory 44-15 over number 10 West Allegheny. So Central Valley hosting Laurel Highlands Friday. Thomas Jefferson, the number 3 seed, also gets a bye to the quarters. And the Jaguars will be hosting number 11 Greater Latrobe. The Wildcats upsetting 6-seeded Highlands at Highlands in overtime, 28-21. We're going to hear from their head coach, Ron Prady, momentarily. But Flick, this was a a game that, I thought Greater Latrobe would be very competitive. I thought it would be tough for them to knock off a team that was 9-1, and yet they played some great defense. It felt a lot like that Franklin Regional overtime victory for Greater Latrobe early in the season, didn't it?
Yeah, it did. I mean, it had that same type of feel, and just the way that the game ended was pretty thrilling, man. I mean, for Latrobe to win their first playoff game since, was it 1960 or something?
1968.
1968. That was incredible. And I know you spoke with Ron Prady on the air. I had a chance to talk with him off the air, and he's like, I really believe that we can beat this team. A lot of respect for them, but he's like, but I do believe that we can do it. And I don't know if people realize kind of what happened at the end of the game. It was pretty wild. It goes into overtime, and it was Robbie Fulton scoring on a Wildcat snap. Actually, he got to the corner, got to the edge, and was able to kind of scamper into the end zone to give Latrobe a 28-21 lead after the extra point. And then Highlands runs two plays. On second down, they run it down to the 4-yard line. So they should have had third down and goal from the 4. And, you start thinking, at least as you're watching the game, like, if they score, are they going to go for 2? Are they going to try to get the win? So they run down to the 4-yard line, but they took a penalty after the play was over, a personal foul penalty. I asked Coach Prady about it, and I don't know, I guess someone maybe hit someone after the play or tapped someone or something. I don't know. But so instead of having third down and goal from the 4, they have third down and goal from the 19, and then they throw the interception to end the game, and everyone goes nuts on the Wildcat sideline. So, I mean, again, that was such a crucial penalty at that point, and it's not a repeat of down because it's a dead ball after the play, and that's it. So that's how the game ended. But I'm sure that Boomer would say that our guys showed some good discipline there. Not getting offsetting penalties, if you will, whatever happened. But obviously a crucial penalty. But give credit to Latrobe, man. Again, Robbie Fulton, just such a difference maker. And another thing that Boomer said, he said, hey, I think we're going to win this Friday. And he said, and you know what? I think next year we're going to be pretty darn good too, because we have some really good kids coming back. And one other point I wanted to make, Sean, you made a great point last week about Johnny Wetzel having to make plays in the playoffs to give Latrobe another option other than Robbie Fulton. And he did. He threw 2 touchdown passes in the game. So you got to give him a lot of credit. Didn't attempt a ton of passes, but you don't need to with Robbie. I mean, you just make some maybe big throws, and I think he did against Highlands.
Yeah, he's not going to be like a Caden Olson or a Brad Birch that's going to go out and throw it 30 times for 300 yards. It's more about, if we call 7 passes, can he complete 5 of them and pick up some big plays and not make the mistakes? And he was able to do that and guide them to a victory. And Chaton Williams with the game-sealing interception. And again, this is a big one for Greater Latrobe, and I know Coach Prady downplays what it means for him to some extent personally, but his first year, he guides them to their first playoff win since the 60s. Obviously, this is something special, and Greater Latrobe has certainly embraced it. So let's now hear from the man known as Boomer, Ron Prady, talking about Greater Latrobe's win in the first round and what's next, Thomas Jefferson in the quarterfinals. Here's now Ron Prady. I know you went into that game as an underdog, but you're able to pull off the upset on the road. I'm sure there was a lot of excitement to get the first playoff win since 1968. What was that moment like when you secured that victory in overtime?
Well, it was most thrilling for our kids. The work they've put in, hearing about the drought for years, and our kids to like I said, put the work in and to execute and to fight their tails off and come out with a win was really exciting for those guys.
28-21, you knock off Highlands in overtime. It's not the first time that you've won an overtime game this season. Back at the very early stages of the campaign, you knocked off Franklin Regional. Is there any benefit to already having that experience playing overtime, since it is really a much different format than regulation play?
I think it didn't hurt. Both times we had to go on offense first, which is no big deal. But we also practice it in the scrimmage with Norwin this year. We went 2 overtime sessions. So, that was a good thing too. But, yeah, I just, I thought they were dead tired at the end of regulation. Highlands was. And our kids were still, I think running on a lot of adrenaline. But our kids were still seemed like they had a lot of energy. So we felt pretty good at that time, at that moment.
For a team like yours that hasn't had a lot of postseason success, as we mentioned, you haven't won a playoff game in over 50 years. Sometimes it's about making sure that everyone believes that you can win. Was there a point in the game where you kind of realized our guys are locked in and we have a real chance to pull this off?
Well, I mean, we never had to lead until overtime. So there was no point where we thought, we got this thing in the bag at all. It was back and forth. They scored first, we answered next series. They scored next, we answered. Every time they scored, we answered the very next series. Obviously there were a lot of possessions in there where there was no score, but not until that Jaton Williams pick on about the 3-yard line did we feel like this game's over.
Talk about your sophomore quarterback, John Wetzel. I know he didn't have a prolific passing game in terms of the yardage, but he threw for a couple of touchdowns, and he's a guy that I think has pretty steadily grown from the start of the season up to this point. What stood out about his play?
Well, he's really grown, and the big thing is the efficiency which he's throwing the ball. It's not like he's going 6 for 18. He's 6 for 8. He's 7 for 7 some games, 7 for 10. And we don't throw it a ton, obviously, but when we do, he's been very efficient and for the most part taking care of the football. However, this week, he converted a huge 3rd and 13 on a scoring drive with his feet, and it was an amazing run. To stay in bounds, he leaped the kid, broke 2 tackles when he hit the ground, and that was a huge play for us. And then I think he carried the ball 3 straight plays after that. He kind of took over that drive, and John's come a long way, and he's going to continue to grow.
Now, Robbie Fulton, the all-time single-season record holder for Wildcats history, he had another big game with a couple of touchdowns. The yardage total wasn't what we're accustomed to seeing, but I know you're going against a really good team, so it was hard-earned yards. His performance obviously stood out as well, especially the overtime touchdown. Was it pretty clear once you got to overtime that you were going to be giving him the football?
It's not a bad thing to give Robbie the ball in overtime. We saw, it was effective for us at Franklin Regional, and that's probably the guy we want the ball in his hands in that moment. The first half we only ran 15 plays. They kind of controlled the clock. We had 2 turnovers that shortened our drive. So, Robbie got the ball a lot more in the second half, and he I think he wore him down a little bit too.
Well, you talk about your turnovers, but your defense also forced a number of turnovers against a pretty prolific quarterback in Chandler Timmons, one of the best that Highlands and really the WPIAL has seen in a long time, a 4-year starter. How did you have success against him?
Well, I think we got in some throwing lanes. Alex Tash had a nice pick on a boot play that he read the route. He got a good drop. He got underneath the ball, and I don't think Timmons ever saw him. And then the first one was a deep ball they tried to throw, and Colin Stevens made a heck of a play on that ball too. And then the last one, obviously, overtime, Jaton with a pretty good play. But each time we feel like he was on the move, but he made some great throws on the move. But 2 of those 3, he was on the run a little bit. We had some pressure on him, and that helped.
Well, the takeaway is just part of what was a terrific defensive effort, holding Highlands to 21 points, including overtime. This is a team that even in their one loss had put up a lot of points and yardage. So overall, as a defense, what really allowed your team to have that success? And maybe who are some of the players who stood out?
Well, I think it's just not giving up big plays over the top, and if we do that, we have a chance. But some of those guys were like, Alex Tash played really well. Danny Calabrese plays well. Timmy Meyers is the other defensive end. He's played well. Johnny Wetzel's been fantastic for us on defense. And Corey Borio, Jaton Williams. Don Flanagan is really solid at the corner for us. A guy that doesn't get a ton of credit, but a really good tackler. Plays with good technique out there at corner. So we have a lot of guys that have stepped up defensively.
Was Danny Calabrese extra motivated by that Baldy breakdown?
Maybe he wanted another one.
So before we look ahead, and obviously there's a big one upcoming, just try to encapsulate what this means for the program to get this playoff victory and how it maybe has grown the confidence of your players even more heading into the next one.
Yeah, I think that's the important part is that our players, I think, now believe that we can play with anybody. I think at the end of the year, we'll look back and, if there's any nostalgia about winning a playoff game, we'll talk about it then. But right now, we're just focused on, getting prepared for this Friday and playing TJ. But it was exciting for our kids. There's excitement in the school and in the community. So all that, is great for our program and great for our kids.
So you mentioned TJ, Thomas Jefferson, a team that you played in the regular season and played very competitively, albeit in a loss. Seeing them the second time around, what maybe do you need to do differently?
Well, I know it's going to be tougher this week. They're a lot better, obviously, than they were in week 4. But again, we have to limit big plays against those guys, and they're tough to run the ball on. They're tough to throw. They're a typical TJ team that does everything well. They're big, they run to the ball, they're strong. So it's going to be really tough on us. But, we're going to prepare this week and see what happens Friday night.
One thing that Thomas Jefferson typically excels at is running the football. And I know that they have a pretty strong arm quarterback this year, but it seems like they do their best work when they keep it on the ground by and large. And Elias Lippin caught part of that, certainly. How do you try to slow down a running game that, quite frankly, very few opponents can slow down?
I don't know. That's what we're trying to figure out this week. It's going to be tough. But, we have to be in our run lanes. We got to play cutback runs. We have to do, near perfect technique to be in the game with these guys. And, their run game certainly sets up their play action. They're really good at play action. And the kid's deep ball is really impressive. He can drop it in there just about anywhere. So, it's going to be a battle. And, I think we're going to be up for it, though.
You coached a Wisconsin commit a year ago in Cade Yacomelli. Now you're going against one with Thomas Jefferson's Jordan Mayer, and I know that he's a pretty special player in his own right. Talk about how he impacts the game, what he does well, and how you will have to try to focus on limiting his effectiveness.
Yeah, he's so long. He's got some of the longest arms I've ever seen, and he's just disruptive. He has a great first step off the ball. You pretty much have to double the kid every play. And otherwise, he's going to be in your backfield, being disruptive. But, no, he's a great player, much like Cade was. And, that's why those guys are playing in the Big Ten.
Does he typically line up as a defensive end on that side of the ball?
Typically, yeah. And he's effective at tight end, too. They get him the ball at tight end a lot, too.
So Thomas Jefferson is a team familiar with playing in the postseason and playing in big games. I know your team isn't. Is there any way that you can try to overcome that aspect of it?
Well, I think the good thing is we've played there this year already. We've played at TJ. We've been to that stadium. We've have some idea what it's like down there. So hopefully that comfort level will help our kids when we go down there Friday. But ultimately, at 7:00, it's another football game, and that's the thing that we stress: just go play, and play really hard.
I've asked John Ruane this question, so I'll ask it to you as well. You're going against one of the most storied and accomplished coaches in WPIAL history, in Bill Chirpek. Does that motivate you to be even better? Does that bring out the best in you as a coach going against a legendary opponent like him?
No, because it's not me and him on the field. Obviously, we have some impact, but it's our players versus their players, and we're going to do the best job we can Monday through Friday to prepare our team, and I'm sure he's going to do the same. And then, we'll get out there, and ultimately it comes down to who makes the least mistakes. Don't turn the ball over, don't have major penalties. That's a huge factor in the game, and that's what we're focused on right now.
Well, Ron, I know you mentioned it briefly, but what's the atmosphere like, the vibe like around the community? I know you teach at Greater Latrobe, so you're probably getting a lot of congratulations just walking around, but what's the feeling like?
I think there's some excitement in the program, and that's good. Our kids have earned that. They've played hard. They've won 7 games to this point. But it's an exciting time right now, and we tell our kids to relish it and enjoy it. during the day, but when they come out here at 3 o'clock, we got to get to work.
Well, yeah, certainly enjoy it, and hopefully you get to enjoy it a week longer or so. So congratulations on getting this point, and good luck on Friday.
Thanks, Sean.
Absolutely. Ron Prady, the head coach for Greater Latrobe.
Right now at Smale Kia, take $500 off any in-stock or incoming 2023 Kia Soul or Forte, or lease a 2023 Kia Forte LXS for just $295 a month. A fair price all the time. At Smale Kia, you never have to worry about the ugly three. No sly market adjustments, no creepy addendum, no fancy surcharges. Avoid the ugly three and be free. Shop Smale Kia, where you never pay more than MSRP.
Hi, Westmoreland sports fans. This is Al Gallardo, financial advisor with Lincoln Investment and longtime Westmoreland County resident. Whether it's a traditional or Roth IRA, 403B or 457 plan, mutual funds, ETFs, stocks, or bonds, I can help you navigate the markets and assist you in achieving all of your goals. Call me at 724-309-8337 or email me at agallardo@lincolninvestment.com and we'll get started together. Good luck to all of the area's athletes and coaches this season.
East Suburban Sports Medicine, Western Pennsylvania's #1 physical therapy practice, is now in Greensburg, voted by Trib Live readers as the best of the best. Our new Greensburg clinic provides orthopedic, concussion, lymphedema, and pelvic health therapy, conveniently located at 133 Donahoe Road, right next to Best Buy. East Suburban Sports Medicine, the best care anywhere, hands down. Call 412-856-8060 and schedule an appointment today.
Welcome back to a special playoff edition of Westmoreland on the Gridiron. Sean Meyers, Dan Flickinger. We thank Ron Prady, the head coach for Greater Latrobe, for taking the time. Always enjoy talking to him. I've talked to him every single week this season as I do a preview article for the Latrobe Bulletin.
He's a good guy, man. He's a good guy.
I always get something. He doesn't, he's not one of those guys that will go on for hours and hours, but he'll always give you something good, and he always seems to be upbeat. Certainly he should be upbeat now. Obviously a banner performance for his team. And also, how about the recognition one of his players got recently by Baldy?
Yeah. Now, if you missed it, you can read the article right now, westmorelandsports.com. Go to our news section, latest news section. Daniel Calabrese, a defensive lineman for the Latrobe Wildcats, was recently recognized. His play was recently recognized against Trinity, which happened a few weeks ago by the NFL Network. It was really neat. So if you want to check out the article, go to westmorelandsports.com. And because his play was recognized, the Latrobe Wildcats football program gets either $3,000 worth of equipment, or they get a robotic tackling dummy. They chose to take the tackling dummy. And if you want to Google it, just Google, robotic tackling dummy, you'll see it. It is wild, man. It has wheels on like the bottom, and it just takes off down the field. And so it's pretty cool because it keeps wear and tear off your off your players and everything. Instead of hitting each other, you can tackle the dummy because it actually moves around. And so listen, when we go to training camp, Sean, either you or I, or maybe both of us, are tackling this thing. We got to take a video of it.
What about Fez?
Oh yeah, Fez. Oh my God, that's what we're gonna do. Fez is Mr. Pot. He was in the paper. I
know.
He deserves it, though. But, yeah, we'll have to get Fez to do it. We'll video that. But that's really neat, though. So congratulations to Danny. That was a pretty cool honor, one that he didn't expect. He didn't even know that anyone nominated him for it. He said that he got a text message from, I think it was his girlfriend's mom, or they were in a text thread or something, and sent the video to him. And then Coach Prady called him down to his room in school. So it was pretty cool moment for them.
I pretty regularly watch Twitter Baldy breakdowns, by the way. I really enjoy it. And, I told Ron, it's great for me because I'm not an X and O's football guy. I'm not an expert on it. So for me to have someone explaining, because he does it, I'm a big Penn State guy. So, he does it on Micah Parsons. I swear every single week he does one for him. So I love just seeing him diagram it. And so to see him do that for a high school player, what a great thrill. So good stuff for Greater Latrobe.
And by the way, another funny part was Danny Calabrese told me that Coach Prady and also Mike Paremka, the superintendent and the color analyst for Latrobe Broadcasts, had to explain to him who Brian Baldinger was. So once they explained it to him, he thought it was even cooler. So
there you go. Perfect. Well, maybe there'll be some more Baldy breakdowns for the other teams that we're going to get to. Let's now look at the 3A bracket. And we mentioned probably the likeliest team that can make a postseason run to a championship in Westmoreland County still remains. That's the Bell Vernon Area Leopards. They got the number 1 seed and a bye, and thus they will play their first postseason game this Friday at home against East Allegheny. We're going to hear from Matt Humbert in just a second. East Allegheny secured a spot in the quarterfinals with a 42-39 victory against Mount Pleasant area at Mount Pleasant. Without going too much into details here, Flick, this was kind of an unusual circumstance on both sides. East Allegheny was far from 100%. They had some pretty severe, I guess, illnesses going through the team earlier in the week. They got some guys back. They weren't anywhere close to 100%. Mount Pleasant area had, I believe, 6 players who were unavailable due to suspension for something that came out from the prior week against Southmoreland, and also did not have their head coach, Jason Fazikis, there during the game. So really sort of a bizarre sequence, and it still turned out to be an incredible game, one that Don Pecora's squad pulled out by 3. Yeah, one that Mount Pleasant could have won, and I'm sure those kids think that they should have won it. But, they just really got rocked, with what came out and what they had to do in terms of suspensions. And I give a lot of credit to Jason Fazikis. I mean, a lot of people were like, why isn't he coaching tonight? And you finally kind of heard why. And not that he did anything wrong. I mean, when you have a team of, 50 kids, sometimes that's not easy to keep all of them from doing something silly. And what they did allegedly was certainly silly. The few kids that did it. But it was almost as if he said, you know what, I'm responsible for all the kids regardless. And I don't think it's right that I coach tonight. And so I thought that was, a nice message by him, not coaching, even though I certainly don't blame him. But you know how Jason is. He's a guy that certainly has a lot of character, has a lot of pride and everything like that. How tough must that have been, though, for him to
that's what I was just about to say.
Yeah.
A home playoff game, certainly a winnable game for them, and to not coach. I mean, it certainly had to have been a very difficult decision, and it had to be really, really difficult because there was no video stream of the game. So I don't know if Jason was like listening to it or if he was, watching it with binoculars somewhere. I have no idea, and I'm sure he'll never probably divulge that information. But just the game in general, though, to be without some of your teammates and to be without your head coach and to really play the way that you did, if you're Mount Pleasant, I mean, there certainly had to have been a lot of pride around that. And to lose like that, it had to have been really, really tough. But again, a hallmark of what Mount Pleasant is, 193 yards for Robbie Labuda. What a tremendous career for Robbie, especially his senior year. Lane Golkowski really stormed onto the scene this year, 128 yards on the ground for him. So Mount Pleasant did everything they wanted to do offensively, but unfortunately East Allegheny just kept scoring, and they move on. Yeah, Michael Cahill had an incredible showing for the Wildcats in that victory. We'll get to that matchup against Bell Vernon area in just a second. Freeport, the number 4 seed, also got a bye to the quarters. They will face number 5 West Mifflin. We talked about the prolific passing performance by Newby, the quarterback for the Titans. They win 54-28 against number 12 Southmoreland. So the Scotties season concludes. And I think this is sort of what we thought. Southmoreland, much like Mount Pleasant, offense was not a struggle for most of this season. They've had some pretty potent offensive performances. The question was, would they be able to stop the Titans? Well, the answer was no. They were unable to do so. So Tim Bukowski, much like his predecessor, Dave Kiefer, getting to the playoffs, a big deal. They've yet to get over the hump, unfortunately. Will not happen here in 2022 as well. Yeah, and that's certainly a goal, I know, and that's going to continue to be a goal, unfortunately, after losing in the first round this year. But, West Mifflin just kept scoring, and as you mentioned, Southmoreland's put up some nice offensive numbers, whether it's in wins or losses this year, despite a couple of stinkers in a couple of those games. But A nice ending for the Kiefer to Keffer connection. I mean, they hooked up 7 times, last week offensively, but again, the defense just could not hold West Mifflin down in that game.
Yeah. And so it will be Freeport hosting West Mifflin Friday at 7. On the other side, Avonworth, the number 2 seed, also a bye. They will face number 7 Beaver, as Beaver, the Bobcats, defeating Deer Lakes 17-3. That will take place at Avonworth High School on Friday, that quarterfinals matchup. And the other quarterfinals, number 3 Elizabeth Forward. The Warriors got a bye. They're looking to bounce back after their season finale loss against Bell Vernon area, regular season finale, I should note. They will play against number 6 Shadyside Academy. The Bulldogs winning against South Park at home, 35-14 in favor of 6-seeded Shadyside over number 11 South Park. So EF will host Shadyside on Friday. And so let's focus a little bit more on Bell Vernon and East Allegheny. We're going to hear from Matt Humbert momentarily. For the Leopards, to me, I think the biggest thing is, can they stay healthy? And can they limit turnovers? If they do those 2 things, I think this is probably the most talented team in the classification. And we saw when they are dialed in like they were against Elizabeth Forward from the very first play, I don't know that any team's going to be able to beat them straight up unless they beat themselves to some degree.
Yeah, and you also have to consider, can they overcome not playing for a week? Obviously, that can really help teams, especially as you mentioned, the health of a guy like Jake Jedico and maybe some other guys that we don't know about that are banged up or whatever.
Well, I can tell you, Polot's not ready yet, but it does give him an extra week to get closer to coming back. And now he needs his teammates to step up and give him a chance to come back if they can keep the season going.
Yeah, and I think they'll be able to do that. I mean, look at the way the offense played against Elizabeth Forward. I don't know that East Allegheny's defense is as good as EF, and Bell Vernon ran roughshod over Elizabeth Forward's defense. So I think offensively there will be no issue there. From a defensive standpoint, East Allegheny obviously can put up points. They have some talent on that side, but you get a couple of stops and your offense can go down and score. You can put the game away quickly, I think, if you can do that. So I think that'll be paramount for Bell Vernon. But I mean, the way we saw them play, Sean, against Elizabeth Forward, as long as they can continue that, I don't see them losing to anybody before Acrisure.
And so the crazy thing is we think so much about their offense, and rightfully so, with Quentin Martin and everything that he can do on that side of the ball, and Jake Jedico, and they've got a pretty good passing attack as well. But really, I think the defense has been their number one attribute this season. So look at down the stretch. This is what they did after their last loss against Penn Trafford, which, by the way, they only gave up 14 points in that loss. They allowed 7 at Thomas Jefferson, shut out South Allegheny, allowed 7 at Greensburg-Salem, allowed 7 to Mount Pleasant, shut out Southmoreland, and allowed 14 to Elizabeth Forward. So that is, they're not getting torched by any opponent, including the very best teams that the WPIAL has to offer. So I think defensively, it would be kind of shocking. It would almost be like the equivalent of Franklin Regional getting shut out. So maybe if you're Matt Humbert, you look at that and say, hey, I don't care what we've done all season long. It means absolutely nothing if we don't continue it here in the playoffs. But I think their defense is championship caliber.
And I thought that was a great point by you, because is this conference really strong when you compare it to Elizabeth Forward and Bell Vernon? Like, both of those teams are really a cut above. But Bell Vernon did it, as you mentioned, against some really good teams too, like Thomas Jefferson. Elizabeth Forward came in averaging, right now they're averaging 41.8 points per game. And Bell Vernon, as you mentioned, limited them to just 14. So you're right. Defensively, they've been really, really good. And that's going to spell a heck of a challenge for our guy, Don Pecora in East Allegheny.
They were averaging 44.9 before that game.
Before the game, right? So there you go.
That's why I got all my papers here.
I knew you'd have it. I knew you'd have it.
Well, let's now hear from Matt Humbert, the head coach of Bell Vernon area, talking about what his team did during the bye week and how they're preparing for number 9 East Allegheny. Here's Matt Humbert. First off, Matt, I'm sure that was a big accomplishment to win the conference, to get the number 1 seed. What did you do over the past week to make sure your team stays sharp while still probably recovering a little bit from a rigorous regular season schedule?
I mean, we kind of balanced it out. I think we really increased our rehab with a lot of the kids. I think the trainers were pretty busy this week with making sure that, the kids that needed it really were rehabbed before and after practice. So, it was good because we do have a couple guys nicked a little bit. Nothing that will prevent anyone from playing on a Friday night, but it was good to kind of lick those wounds and get those healed up a little bit. But really, we just treated it like a practice week. We kind of wanted to stick to that same script, that same rigid day in and day out. And then we were able to lift the kids a little bit more, run the kids a little bit more, and focus more on some individual specific stuff. So it was a good week. Last year we had 2 bye weeks. We enjoyed those weeks. Gave us a leg up on prepping. But when you don't know who you're prepping for, you kind of got to just kind of guess it and, give them a little bit of everything. So I think this year is a little different because I think I started to get a little stir crazy. I kind of wanted to play last Friday. So, I'll take the bye week anytime, but I think we're all ready to go.
What did you do? Did you go out and watch the Mount Pleasant EA game, or did you kind of just stay at home and gather information that way?
I stayed at home. Most of my coaches went to that game. So, I got the updates minutely, if not, quarterly. But I just stayed home with my family. It's been a rarity to have a Friday night with the kids. So I took full advantage of that. We had a workout and practice on Friday, and then we got the kids out of there. So most of the guys went down to the game, and I just kind of stayed at home.
I know you mentioned getting some guys back healthy, and obviously that's key to make a postseason run. Often it comes down to the team that's the healthiest at the end of the season. I know in that game against Elizabeth Ford, you were without some guys. Evan Polott was notable. And then Jake Jedico seemingly suffered an injury in that one. So what's their status, and do you anticipate that they will be able to contribute going forward?
Yeah, and you hit it right on the head. That's the key. If you look at the WPIAL championship last year, we kind of, got into Hines on fumes. When we came out after halftime, we were down 4 kids, 2 that got nicked in that game, and then 2 big injuries leading up to that game. So I think that's a huge key. I'm not going to say it's the main key, but it's a huge key if you could just withstand attrition and get to those games in the postseason healthy. And we're pretty much there to a certain degree. Evan still has a couple more weeks, and he's a vital component to our offense and defense. So we're really hoping to get him back. Jedico, we only really played a quarter with him. So if you think about it, he was out 75% of that game against Elizabeth Ford, and some of the kids were able to step in and do a good job in his absence. So Jedico's good. Polott's still got a couple weeks. Our starting inside backer that's been out since Thomas Jefferson, this is his first week that he can actually kind of run around and semi-practice a little bit. So we're anticipating that if we win Friday, he'll be able to go next week. So that'll be a good little boost for us, adding him to our linebacking core. But yeah, we just we got to make sure that we nurse some of those small injuries, and we're hoping to get Evan back in the near future.
So you talked about the EF game. Man, what a statement victory that was. Your team looked incredible. And I've seen Quentin Martin. I think that was maybe the 5th or 6th time. That was the best that I've ever seen him look, just completely dominating that game in all phases. How much did it mean to come out on the road against a previously unbeaten team and to show right off the bat, I think less than 15 seconds in, that your team was going to be in command of that one?
Well, I think it was gratifying to see that it kind of actually worked out the way that you wanted it to work out. A lot of times you have a game plan and a strategy of what you want to do. And, a couple things here or there kind of skew that and derail that game plan. And even if you look, they really tried kind of pooching the ball to the front line on the kickoffs every time they kicked the ball off. And those could have been deadly if we didn't have the kids prepped and ready to catch those and fair catch those. And that helped with our field advantage. But we wanted to kind of try to get the splash plays going early on. And that was what we were able to do. And when we came out after halftime, we really wanted to try to ground it in the run game. And ironically, it worked out that way. So we were lucky to do it. And, to see Quentin with everything that he did was a special night for him. But then again, you got to remember, Jedico didn't play much of that game. So we didn't really have that 1-2 type of combo we typically do, which then allowed Quentin to obviously kind of take over and do what he does. So, it was a good game, but, that's a type of team that there's a chance if we take care of business, we'll see them again. And they're the type that you can't just rest your laurels on, you put 48 on them, because, they have big play capability to be able to get 6 points at any point in juncture of the game. And they're physical. So it's one of those things where, obviously it was a solid victory for us, but that's not anything that we're going to hang our hats on. Our hats are hanging on the concept of winning a WPIAL championship. And if we take care of business this week and next week, and that's a big if we take care of business, there's a chance we might see those guys again. So, just 1 week at a time, one day at a time. And I like where we're at right now from a health standpoint and how we're playing. I think defensively, we've been such a solid unit all year. Adding Moody back to that only helps out next week if we're lucky to advance past this week. And then, offensively, I think we've been getting better each week, which has been a catalyst to, our success over the past 5-6 weeks.
Well, you're playing an East Allegheny team that has some momentum. They put up 42 points in kind of a shootout victory against Mount Pleasant, 42-39 in favor of the 9th-seeded Wildcats. And I know that Michael Cahill had a performance for a lifetime in that contest. When you look at EA, especially in that first-round victory, what jumps out about them?
I think their quarterback. I think he's a kid that can definitely, do some damage. He can run the ball. He can throw the ball. I think they have skill, and I think that's what really pops off the film. They're a team that, they like to throw the ball around, and they can run it. But, I think they're going to try to do what they can to get us in the passing game. And they love trick plays. They love screens. So those are the things that kind of pop off in terms of the emphasis and preparation. They're going to be, throwing I think we have 5 or 6 catalog screens, and they're nice screens. They do a good job with the screen game. So we got to be ready for that stuff. And then we got to be ready for the double passes and anything that they've shown on film that, they try to get. Also, the tailback is very elusive. If you look at a few touchdowns over their past few weeks of the regular season and even the postseason, they have a tendency to, reverse field and kind of do some damage that way. They have a tendency to, scramble and then hurt you with a broken play. So their broken play ability and their ability to have their athletes kind of be athletes in any given time and any given opportunity, that's going to stress our defense a little bit in terms of us getting to the ball, but us more importantly break it down and making sure that we can bottle up their kids.
So obviously, you mentioned what they do well and what you'll need to do. Do you anticipate that your team's going to be facing some pressure because you are the number 1 seed and the heavy favorite? I know you've played with that last year as well, but does that add some pressure to your players?
I don't think it does. And why I don't think that does is because, almost, with the exception of the Elizabeth Ford game, we always were, quote unquote, the favorite to win those conference games. And I think the kids and the coaches did a good job of being realistic in terms of, knowing that if we do everything that we should do, and if we take care of the football and if we execute, that, we should be victorious. I mean, I don't think there's any beating around the bush with a number one of our or a majority of our conference opponents. So I think for most of those conference games, the kids knew that they would be the favorite to win. So I don't think it's anything different from what they've experienced over the past 5 weeks to what they're experiencing Friday. The gravity obviously is that, if you lose, you don't play any more football. So I think they're good with that. I think that's one thing that I've preached all year that we really try to emphasize and we really try to instill that, they are the targets, they are the favorites in 3A. There's no doubt about that. If we have the ability to win it all, and I don't think that I shy away from that. I mean, and sometimes I think as a coach, you got to be calculated in how you word things, and you can't. I'm not the guy that is bravado speaking daily to my kids. I mean, I'm a realist. I mean, anything can happen on any given day in that football game, and you can't take anything for granted, and you have to come play and execute. And I think that's what we've done so well. I've never had to worry about the kids getting too high or too low. I mean, we've been through, back-to-back losses with McKee's Point and Penn Trafford, and that was a low point. And that locker room was able to battle through that, contrary to what all the noise was going on the outside. They were able to kind of operate with a slow heartbeat, a steady hand. And I think that's how we're approaching this game Friday night. We're just going to operate with a steady hand, a slow heartbeat, and we're going to try to be as tough as we possibly can and as hit as hard as we possibly can.
Final question for you. Obviously, getting the number 1 seed, winning your conference, the benefit is you get this home game. So how important is it to be playing at the beach, and what do you anticipate in terms of that environment on Friday?
Well, the way the classifications worked, I mean, 1 through 4 was going to get a home game. So we kind of knew, even if we maybe drop one conference game, that we probably still have a home game. But it's huge. And it's huge because everybody wants a home game, right? From a travel logistical standpoint. But, I think we put such a romanticized aspect on our field, our stadium, our area. We like to think that it's a different type of atmosphere and environment when a team comes and plays us. And we hold that special. And that's one thing that motivates us. We always talk about, what's your why you do what you do. I think the beach is probably on everyone's level of what they and why they do what they do. So for us to be able to get those seniors one more game, it's paramount, because it's just one more game at that venue that we hold near and dear to our hearts. And that's not an over embellishment, or that's not hyperbole. I mean, the kids have such an emotional attachment. I have such an emotional attachment to that stadium that's the true benefit, is that we get to be in the comfort of our own home, and we get one more opportunity to play on that field and to showcase our atmosphere on a Friday night.
I'm sure it's a little more work for you as an athletic director, but work you probably don't mind. So, Matt, thank you so much for taking the time.
Yeah, I don't mind at all, especially because the kids have off on Friday, so I can dedicate my whole morning to getting stadium prepped and whatnot. So I'll gladly take the extra prep work that comes with a Friday home game to have a Friday home game.
All right. Thanks so much. Congratulations on getting this point, and good luck on
guys.
Friday night as well. That's Matt Humbert, the head coach of the Belle Vernon Area Leopards.
Coach, building a championship team, I know for you, it's all about the details. The same goes with the Bowsers.
No doubt about it. I mean, it's the tiny little details every single day, not forgetting about it the next day, and maybe doing it the following day. I mean, I think details are everything.
As Coach says, get your eyes right on the power of Bowser.
The Bowser family is proud to have Coach Narduzzi as part of our team.
D'Annunzio's Italian Restaurants would like to express our sincere thanks to all of our loyal customers for their continued support dating back to our beginning in 1977. Since then, we've grown from our original location in Jeanette. We then added Monroeville in 1997 and expanded even further as we moved into the Arnold Palmer Regional Airport in Latrobe in 2004. It is our pleasure to provide our customers with the very best experience. We look forward to seeing you soon.
Westmoreland County's broadcast home for high school sports, the Westmoreland Sports Network.
We roll along here on another playoff edition of Westmoreland on the Gridiron. Hopefully not for the last time this season, but we'll wait and see how Friday works out. I'm Sean Meyers, joined by Dan Flickinger. We appreciate Matt Humbert, a busy man. And as he mentioned, yeah, it does mean extra work for him because they're hosting a playoff game. But I think that's extra work that he's embracing for a week like this.
And he has a lot of people that help him too. Yeah. And the one thing that's really cool, like when you broadcast the game at Belle Vernon, I don't know if Matt's always done this or not, but he responds with like kind of a breakdown of who's taking care of the press box, where you're going to be sitting, and they have like a whole game plan that he basically sends out, not on the field. I'm talking about off the field. So he has a lot of people that help him, including, I got to give a shout out, not that she's watching, Taylor Lubinsky, who played at Hempfield. I don't know if she teaches at Belle Vernon. I ran into her at one of the Belle Vernon games. Like, what are you doing here? She's like, I'm helping with the press box. So I don't know. She must teach at Belle Vernon or something. Anyway, I figured I'd give her a shout out now.
Why wouldn't she be watching?
That's true. She probably is. Hi, Taylor.
Right. Absolutely.
If you know Taylor, tell her that we said hi.
Absolutely. From 3A, let's now look at 2A, where there's another Westmoreland County team still alive. As the number 1 seed, Steel Valley, the Ironmen had a bye. They are in the quarterfinals. They will play number 8 McGuffey, the Highlanders, knocking off number 9 Mohawk. 34-29 in favor of McGuffey. So that will be at Steel Valley Friday at 7. On that same side of the bracket, number 4 Neshannock advances to the quarterfinals, knocking off number 13 Burrell 48-6. And the Lancers will host number 12 Washington, which upset 5th-seeded and defending champion Sarah Catholic 49-21. And a game that was played at Norwin High School. So the number 12 Little Prexies against number 4 Neshannock. Unfortunately for Burrell, a team that was banged up, did not have their starting quarterback in Chase Fenner. Okay, he doesn't throw a lot, but for that style of offense, it's not easy to play quarterback and, make sure that you're giving it to the right person at the right time. So Sean Liotta, he made the most of a group that probably wasn't a highly skilled offensive group, but that was kind of a tough, gritty group. Tough way for their season to end. They did not play their best football, but ultimately, I think that it's a successful season, although they're not going to want to think back to this matchup against Neshannock for too long.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And again, I know we've talked about this a few times. Sean Liotta did something that maybe not all coaches do, and that is instead of running what he wanted to run, he kind of adjusted and ran what Burrell's strengths were, and that was running the football instead of winging it all over the place. So give him a lot of credit. Again, not all coaches can do that or want to do that. They just feel that their offense or defense is the best way, no matter what personnel, they'll adapt to it. Sean instead, hey, let's adapt to our personnel and let's run what we believe that we can have the most success with. And they were able to do that. Obviously had that heartbreaking loss against Ligonier Valley and what was a huge game at Burrell that we broadcast. But still a successful year for sure for the Buccaneers. And hey, Devin Beatty, will be back. So
yeah, and so now you always think if they had won that game, what does the season look like? Maybe they're the team that's slotted in around number 7, and they have a much more winnable matchup in the first round in a home game. And that's why the regular season, it really does matter a lot what seed you get, because they had very little chance to go to Neshannock and a Lancers team that is so explosive, because if Burrell gets behind in a game, they are not built to come back. And pretty much every team has hard time slowing down Neshannock. So I think Burrell to have a chance was probably going to score about 40 points. That did not happen, certainly without them being at full strength. Other side of the bracket, number 2, Beaver Falls advances to the quarters via a bye. They will play at Geneva, which has been their home field, against number 7, Ligonier Valley. That's because the Rams knocked off number 10, Western Beaver. Ligonier Valley winning 27-20. We're going to hear from their head man, Roger Beitel, in just a few minutes. That game actually took place at Offutt Field, the home for Greensburg-Salem. Also on that side of the bracket, number 3, Stowe Rocks takes care of business against Riverside, winning 29-0. The Vikings will host a quarterfinals matchup against number 6, KO. Keystone Oaks wins 21-14, knocking off 11th-seeded Apollo Ridge. So Stowe Rocks at home against Keystone Oaks in the 3-6 matchup. Let's focus on the 2-7 matchup, however. Again, Geneva College. I would think Roger Beitel probably has already been there because he has sons who play in that conference with Geneva, the President's Athletic Conference. But, I don't think that they're going to mind too much going to Geneva, because it means they get a chance to keep their postseason alive. To do so, Hayden Siraki had to have another Herculean performance. Fortunately for the Rams, he's been able to do that pretty much his entire time on the varsity, 4 touchdowns and leading them to that win.
Oh, my gosh. What more can we say about him? Each and every week, man, he just puts up the numbers. And, it's one thing to do it against teams that you're supposed to beat and beat soundly. When you get into the playoffs, you just never know what's going to happen. And to see that he can continue that level of play in the playoffs against a good team in Western Beaver, that says a lot about him and says a lot about this team as well. 200 yards on 25 carries for him. And he's just so important on defense as well. And Ligonier Valley, by the way, defensively had 3 picks, in the game, which was gigantic. Obviously, they're going to need to continue to do things like that against Beaver Falls. That's how you beat good teams and teams that, obviously Beaver Falls seated ahead of Ligonier Valley. How do you pull upsets? I mean, you got to, force turnovers, get a big kickoff return, and with Hayden Siraki, that's certainly possible in both of those areas. But man, you just give him so much credit for the type of season that that he's had. I mean, you look at a kid like Colin Smith, who was, one of the best in Ligonier Valley history. Where did he go? He went West Virginia, right? I believe.
Yeah, didn't work out there.
Didn't work out there for him, but out of high school, he's that good that he went to West Virginia. But you compare him to a kid like that and Colin Smith. Everyone knows Hayden Siraki is going to be getting the football, and teams just have not been able to stop him.
Couple of quick notes. I don't know if you remember this or not, because you were next to me when I did the Ligonier Borough game. Ligonier Valley has a Colin Smith on their team currently.
Yeah, I know.
It's not a quarterback.
Yeah.
He's a lineman, but it's kind of crazy they've had two Colin Smiths.
I don't think it's his son quite yet, Sean.
No, it is no relation. The other thing is Roderick Schreier, their quarterback now, passed for 6 yards in this game. So it's a very Burrow-esque performance for Ligonier Valley. And you talked about Coach Liotta. Well, Roger Beitel has done the same thing, adjusting, completely changing from what was a spread offense. He realized that was not going to work with this year's version. And so the proof is in the pudding. Whatever he decided to go with was the right decision. They get their first ever win as a member of the WPIAL in the playoffs.
And you can't forget about John Jablonowski either. I mean, he's been having a pretty good season. I know he's been banged up a little bit, but he's a good kid to get in there when Hayden needs a break.
Yeah, he is incredibly, incredibly fast. Well, let's now hear from Roger Beitel, the head coach of Ligonier Valley, after his team's first ever victory in a WPIAL playoff game and before their matchup against number 2 Beaver Falls. And so first off, Roger, I know you're very happy to be talking to me again. It means your team has advanced, and in the process, a historic win, the first ever postseason win in the WPIAL. What does that mean for you and for this program?
It means a lot, not only to me, but also the program. And I said this after the game, and I'm one of the few people that can say this because I've where we were in District 6 and things like that. With the comment about, I think the hardest thing to do in all of high school sports is to win a WPIAL football playoff game. And some people kind of raised eyebrows about that statement. And I said, I mean it. It's extremely difficult, number one, to just get into the tournament. And then secondly, to win in the tournament whenever you have such high quality and high caliber teams. We're just elated with the opportunity that we had to win the football game on Friday night and to be part of history. And, really excited for the kids because, like I told them after the game, Sean, they're the first ones to ever do something. And no matter what, that isn't anything that anyone can ever take away from them. So history's made. And as a history teacher, those are little things that I kind of take a lot of pride in.
I know that a lot of the faces have changed from the last time you had played Western Beaver. It was back in your first year returning to the WPIAL, but you lost that matchup against the Golden Beavers. This time you knock them off. Both games were close. What do you think maybe was the difference this second time around seeing them?
Well, the big difference really was I think that we limited big plays. And that was something that we needed to do in order to compete with them. I mean, they had tremendous athletes across the board in the receiver position, the quarterback position, running back position. And we were able to get key turnovers, which ultimately led to, and this is an amazing statistic, is that we kept them to 45 offensive plays. And that's a lot of credit goes to the defense for the job that they did. And then also to the offense. Long sustaining drives, I think, really took its toll on them. And for us to keep the ball out of their hands was really the difference. When we lost to them in 2020, it was literally 2 plays. We outplayed them, we outgained them, and they hit 2 fade balls at the time. They had imagine that, a Lincoln Park basketball player who was 6'5". He was a receiver. It was 2 jump balls. And in both instances, they made the plays and we didn't. So with the exception of those 2 plays, we really outplayed them the first time we played them up there. But again, the cast of characters changed tremendously. And, for our kids, that was the big thing with looking at the game plan going in was, we wanted to really pound them with running the football. And that was something that we were able to do with all 11 guys on the offense.
I know you said the cast of characters changed. One guy who was around for that game and was around, obviously, this time was Hayden Siraki. Now, he was a quarterback back in 2020. What a season he is continuing to have. He factored into all 4 of your scores. He continues to do this, even though he's obviously become the focal point of the opposing game plan. How has it still worked?
Well, first off, a lot of credit has to go to our offensive coordinator, Dave Shannon. He comes up with different ways to utilize him, to move him around, subtle changes here and there. And then it comes down to execution. I mean, it's one of those things where our offensive line has done a really good job of blocking. And when you do that, I mean, even if you know that he's going to get the ball, if those guys impose their will and they're able to move a guy against their will, it really doesn't matter. And really a lot of credit, and I think Hayden would be the first one to tell you, he has to go those guys up front. But then, also too, with the change in offense to go go back to the wing T with the misdirection and have a lot of other guys, Duncan Faust had his best game of the season offensively for us. John Jablonowski has been a very explosive player for us, and so has Nick Lonis. And when those guys can play their roles and carry the ball, then they have the opportunity to make a big game, then you can also counter what you do with Hayden the same way. But ultimately in the fourth quarter, when it came down to it, it was get the ball in Hayden's hands and let the offensive line do their job. And he really performed well for us on Friday night on both sides of the.
I know when we talked last week, you said, of course, we wish we were playing at Weller Field, but we have some familiarity with Offutt. So you had to make a little bit of a trek, not nearly as far as what Western Beaver had to travel, obviously. What was that environment like? Did it feel somewhat like a home game, and how do your players respond to that?
I mean, everyone responded tremendously. I mean, I have to give a lot of credit to everybody involved with Greensburg-Salem, their principal, and their maintenance staff and everyone else. I mean, it was top notch. They hosted us like champions, everyone involved. And I can tell you this, Sean, I want to tip my cap not only to all of them, but also to the Greensburg-Salem student section. There was a large contingency of Greensburg-Salem football players that came to the game. They were with our student section and they rooted for us. And I just think the world of that was just a tremendous thing for them to do. And a lot of respect. And that's a team that we played in the regular season. So I definitely want to tip my cap to those kids. But we've played and we've practiced at Offutt so many times over the last, since 2016. We've been there so many different times that it's not anything new for us. And also being on the road. In 2020, we played 6 of our 7 games on the road. 2021, we were flipped and had a lot of games on the road. And then this year we were actually on the road. And at this point, we're 6-0 on the road. So it's something that we're accustomed to. But when it comes down to it, the field's 100 yards long. It's 53 1/3 yards wide. We're playing on the same field. But it's nice that we got a chance to be a little bit closer to home. We took a long trek last year. So as I see it, it was nice that we didn't have to do that. And I'm really not going to feel bad for a team traveling as far as they did, because it's something that we did last year.
So we mentioned a historic victory, obviously something that everyone should be proud of. How long do you allow the players and everyone to celebrate? And then how do you quickly turn the focus to what's next?
Well, we allow the players to celebrate a little bit longer than the coaching staff. We were hard at it yesterday, and we're going to continue today. And then basically, our kids are in the weight room right now lifting, and then we're going to get out in the field and we're going to have a walkthrough, install both of our game plans, and give them the keys to victory, and then have them go study huddle film and get right back at it. We'll have time to celebrate when the season's over, but at this point, and this is kind of our experience we've had in the playoffs, is we'll celebrate the things that we've accomplished during the season at the end of the season. But right now we have tasks at hand, and we're gonna get to work, and we're gonna put our best game plan forward to go up there and shock the world and hopefully beat Beaver Falls.
And so to add to that, how do you balance having your team going through practices, but knowing that now you're 10 plus games into a season, 11 games into a season, you don't want to overwork the guys and obviously put more physical strain so that they're not at 100%. How do you kind of find that balance?
Well, again, I've been around a long time, Sean. So what we've found is that as you get into this part of the season, we almost like a baseball player, we have to have pitch counts. You know, you have to manage the load early in the week. You have to allow your kids to get healthy, because that's the most important part of this part of the year, and that is, fundamentals. We're going to kind of back off on contact. We're going to back off on. And we're going to really focus on game plan execution, because as we see it, it's bonus football. And with the beautiful weather that we've had, the field conditions that we've had due to the weather allows us to get out and practice in a relatively normal situation. So, we're really backing things off. Practice is going to be a little bit shorter. There's going to be a greater attention to detail and a lot more focus on the game plan itself than, say, what you do at the beginning, the first third of the season. And when you're focusing on fundamentals and you're still trying to get kids to know how to block and tackle. When you get into week 12, your daylight's a little bit shorter. The kids have played enough football that they don't need to be banging on each other. So we won't really have much in terms of contact this week, because again, the most important thing is your health on a Friday night.
So you go against Beaver Falls, as you mentioned, be played at Geneva College. One thing that stands out about their team, obviously they have a lot of great players and a winning tradition, but their quarterback's a pretty experienced and pretty talented player in Jaron Brickner. How do you try to slow him down, and what challenges does he pose?
Well, I think he's a great player, and he's going to get his plays. We know that the whole offense runs through him, and if you look at them and you break them down, when they need a play, they rely on him. He can throw the ball well. He runs the ball well. He's a big kid. Came in with, I think he was a preseason Trib Total Media top 25 player in the region, went to Kennywood, enjoyed all that fanfare. So we know he's a top quality player, but he's surrounded by a lot of kids as well. And sure, we want to slow him down. But our big thing, again, is we want to eliminate the big play and force them to drive the length of the field. They have really explosive athletes, Sean, that can go the distance anytime they touch the ball. But if we can take those and turn those, instead of being long touchdown runs or passes, and just turn them into longer gains and then first down again, that's been our success over the last several weeks, going against a lot of high profile players. And our game plan will be very similar this week as well. Our philosophy has always been, let's see what they do best and have them try to beat us doing something that they don't want to do. And that's kind of the same type of thing that we're going to do this week. Is, I know that they want to go over the top throwing the football. So again, let's give them the underneath things. We know what they want to do when the quarterback is in the shotgun compared to what he's like when he's under center, and who they want to have the football. So it's just, for us, it's try to take away a few things, work the analytics, really work on the breakdowns, and do our best to take away what they do. 51% of what they do is double tight. So we have to be solid against double tight. If we can force them out of double tight and go to some other formations, then we're getting them out of their comfort zone. And then I think that we're in a position where they're doing something that they don't want to do. So, it's, for us, I'm a little bit more of a philosopher about things in coaching football. So I always say, let's be comfortable being uncomfortable, and let's make the opponent uncomfortable. And that's kind of what we want to do.
I know you talked about the fact that you've been around a long time and had a lot of success as a head coach, but for these players, some of whom are 15, 16 years old, I would think it could be potentially intimidating to go on the road to play against a number 2 seed that has an incredible football tradition like Beaver Falls does. How do you make sure that is never in the mind of your players as you're making that trip to Geneva?
The big thing is that we just basically give them a plan. And we treat everybody that they're kind of nameless and faceless. Sure, we respect the tradition, but we're not going to get caught up in all of that, because if you do that, then you kind of, they're young kids. They're going to get the mindset that they can't win. Our mindset has been from the beginning of the playoffs is why not us? And if you start to study the history of football and look at all the different teams, there's always that dark horse that emerges out of the playoffs that a lot of people wrote off and thought to themselves, wow, well, how did this team get here? And, those are the kind of great stories that are part of sport. So we've kind of just sold them on the fact, the why not us mentality. Someone's gonna win the game. Why not us? And it worked, through the end of the end of the regular season, and now as we go into the postseason. And that's one of the things that we're going to continue on. I think that it would be rather intimidating that if we were actually playing at Beaver Falls, and they might see that great tradition and Joe Namath's helmet and all that other stuff, but we're playing the game at Geneva. And so it's kind of almost like, a neutral home game. So they're not going to be kind of exposed to all that tremendous tradition. And we're still kind of babies to the WPIAL. I'd say for the most part, our kids don't know that the rich historical and football history of a Beaver Falls. They're just kind of, okay, we're playing them. And that's what's kind of nice about being the newbies on the block.
Lastly, I know that it's a community at Ligonier that loves football. What has the atmosphere been like, the response been like the last couple of weeks, especially after Friday night?
There's a lot of excitement, that's for sure. And I live here. So for me and especially my wife who works here in town, it's been seeing a lot of people, and I just like all the attention that they're giving to the kids. And it's all been positive attention, especially, where we've been with COVID and all these other different things. This is a nice shot in the arm for the community. Get behind the kids, be proud, bring back that Ram pride that we've had for so long. And really, I think it's a great boost for our community overall. And you see it, especially with the elementary kids. And then the messages that I've received through emails and text messages from people in the community. And then I relay those on to the kids. And it means the world to them whenever they see positive things talking about, their accomplishments, and especially the fact that they relish team. And I think that when you look at our football team, Sean, that's the thing that I'm most proud of, is that the kids we put on the field, they do it in a very selfless way, the way that they act on the field, and that they play for each other. And ultimately, in the end, win or lose, as a coach, I find that we're really successful because we got kids that believe in that type of structure.
Well, Roger, once again, congratulations on the historic win, and good luck on Friday as well.
Thanks, Sean. It's always a pleasure to be here, and I appreciate everything you guys do for us and for the kids and the promotion of high school sports.
Absolutely. That's Roger Beitel, head coach of Ligonier Valley.
We've got inventory on the lot and more on the way. Forester, Outback, Ascent, Legacy, and more. Get a great deal on a new 2022 Subaru. Check out SendaleSubaru.com today. Looking to turn your current vehicle into cash? Sendale pays top dollar. Get your best deal at Sendale Subaru, Route 30 Greensburg, SendaleSubaru.com. We would love to meet you.
We know speaking with your teen or your young adult about drugs and alcohol can be challenging, but is necessary. Remember to have a conversation, not a confrontation. Establish good communications, break through barriers, and be firm but loving. Here are some helpful tips. Choose a good place and time to chat. Talk with openness. Actively listen. Offer empathy and support. For more information, visit us online at WEDACINC.org. Westmoreland Drug and Alcohol Commission. Prevention is key.
The Collision Shop by Jason Mignone is your one-stop shop for all things auto body repair. Our experienced technicians and state-of-the-art facilities have you covered on both passenger and heavy-duty vehicle repairs, including scratches, scrapes, and dents, free estimates, body repairs, welding, refinishing, glass replacement, and more. Our all-new alignment and calibration shop has the tooling, equipment, and staffing to ensure top-quality alignment and calibration adjustments for your vehicle. Our friendly office staff is more than happy to assist you through every step of your vehicle's repair process. Visit the Collision Shop by Jason.com for our complete list of services.
Welcome back to another playoff edition of Westmoreland on the Gridiron. Sean Meyers, Dan Flickinger. We thank Roger Beitel, the longtime head coach for Ligonier Valley, for taking the time to join. And, I've been covering Roger now for more than a decade. My first year at the Latrobe Bulletin was the 2012 football season, and I did some Ligonier games then. Very, very successful coach. And I know I've mentioned this before, now the longest tenured Westmoreland County high school football coach. So he deserves all the accolades that he's getting.
The dean. He's the dean.
Yeah, Coach Botta had that for a long time.
Yeah.
Now it is Roger Beitel who holds that distinction. And hopefully, I know every coach, after I talk to him, they say, hopefully I'll talk to you next week. Because if that's the case, that means that they are still going forward in the playoffs. Let's now finish up the playoff brackets with the 1A classification. This, like 5A, very disappointing for the Westmoreland County teams. Not really a shocker on the one side of the bracket, because number 1, Bishop Canevin, heavily favored against number 16, Jeanette, and it exactly played out like that. The Crusaders win 63-14, ending the Jayhawk season. That game was played at Peters Township. So Bishop Canevin into the quarters. They will play number 9, Clairton. The Bears making quick work of Our Lady of the Sacred Heart, the number 8 seed, 45-19. Clairton advances. So Bishop Canevin playing at Dormont Stadium, which is their home, on Friday against number 9, Clairton. We knew that for Thomas Pallone's crew, it was going to be nearly impossible to pull this off. They would have to play the best game of their lives and hope that, quite frankly, Bishop Canevin made a ton of mistakes. It didn't play out like that in the end, although you have to give Jeanette credit. They were competitive early in this one, and that's, for a head coach in his first year, I think kind of a big-time win.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, I couldn't believe, you're trying to keep tabs on all these games, and Jeanette under Tom Pallone, they're going to get back, I believe, to where they were at some point. But this game was just so difficult for them to compete in. So, you're looking at other games, and all of a sudden I see it's 7-7. Wow. It's 14-7 Jeanette. I'm like, oh my gosh. And you just know that Bishop Cam is probably going to take over at some point, but still, I mean, Jeanette's up 14-7. I mean, that was probably a cool moment, especially for the couple of seniors that they have that you kind of remember, like, hey, we were beating them at one point. I know the final score was 63-14, but that was a pretty cool moment. And again, maybe something to build on for going into the off season. And you can't give Tom enough credit for what he's done, and it's so much more at Jeanette, especially now with what you have to do to make sure kids stay and believe in what you're doing. And because if they can get that belief back, that hopefully they can get back to competing for championships and really competing in the playoffs.
Yeah, and it's a team that really could not afford to have injuries at key positions, and unfortunately down the stretch of the regular season and even against Bishop Canevin, those injuries cropped up and made it almost impossible for them to truly compete against one of the very best.
Yeah, he said Mike Mason was playing with 2 broken hands, I guess. He's a receiver, so I don't know. Catch it in your face mask, maybe. I don't.
It's and that's
throw it in there.
Kids want to be out there, but
that's awesome. That's awesome.
There's no doubt that Jeanette really. Most 1A teams can't absorb a lot of injuries, but especially Jeanette with their roster size this year. So their season concludes, but they did make the playoffs a step in the right direction.
Hey, an argument could be made the Steelers receivers also play with 2 broken hands, unless you're George Pickett.
Yeah.
George Pickens. That's what I meant.
Well,
forget the Steelers. Let's just move on.
Heck, that's probably for the best. A little surprising to see this outcome on that same side of the bracket. Number 4, Mapletown. Yeah, they were the much better seed against number 13, Leechburg, but I thought the Blue Devils would have a real chance. Instead, it's the Maples who advance 41-28. They move into the quarters and will play number 5, Southside Beaver, which defeated California 34-3. So Mapletown hosting Southside Beaver in a game that will be played at Waynesburg Central High School, as opposed to Mapletown, which did host against Leechburg in the first round. On the other side, number 2, Laurel defeats Carmichael's, the 15 seed, 53-8. And so the Spartans will play the Union Scotties, the number 10 seed, which knocked off number 7 Burgettstown 32-7. So number 2 Laurel hosting number 10 Union in a game that will be played at Chenango High School, even though Laurel hosted in the first round. So a little confusing that they've changed some of these venues. Nonetheless, Greensburg Central Catholic, we talked about at the onset, upset in a big, big way by number 14, Rochester. The Rams win pretty decidedly, 36-15. So number 14, Rochester moves on. Number 3, GCC sees its season end. The Rams will play against number 6, Fort Cherry, as the Rangers knocked off Monessen, the number 11 seed, 56-42. So number 6 against number 14 in a game that will be played at South Fayette High School. And so there's a lot to digest here on this side. So Monessen, great season. Obviously, we knew that they were going to have a hard time stopping Fort Cherry. They weren't able to do so. But again, the big story in this entire bracket, Greensburg Central Catholic, who had all of those skill players, I don't think they scored until the fourth quarter, correct?
I don't believe so. And they were down 22-0 at halftime. So it was, again, I talked about it at the beginning of the show, but I mean, that has to be extremely disappointing to have expectations and certainly a goal of making a state championship.
And I thought it was a realistic goal.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, at the very least, we knew that they could get to a WPIAL championship game and, play Bishop Canevin again and see what happened. And I mentioned this on one of the previous shows. We broadcast that GCC Bishop Canevin game, and I know BC won by a couple of touchdowns, but GCC had some opportunities in that game that if they go their way and if penalties didn't hurt them, they could have won that game. Maybe the second half goes a little bit differently. And even against Rochester, Craggett bust off a 62-yard touchdown run. That play was called back because of penalty. It just seemed like they could not get any momentum going on their side, whether it was offensively or defensively. Penalties really hurt them. And, Marco Thomas said after the game, every time we felt that things were starting to go well, we just shot ourselves in the foot. And again, Rochester was just more physical than GCC. But, with the way you mentioned the skill players, sometimes if another team is more physical, then you can get around it by hitting big plays against them. But that just didn't happen often enough for GCC in that game. And again, it's not as if it's not how they it's not that they lost. It's even how they lost that was really surprising. You think if they were going to pull an upset, if Rochester was, it maybe, was on a last second play or something, not, down 22-0 at halftime for GCC. Just pretty wild.
Yeah, and indeed. So one of the teams that we thought was certainly one of the better ones in Westmoreland County in terms of postseason aspirations, making a run, sees its season end as well. And so we talked about it before, Flick. That means just 3 teams remain here in Westmoreland County. Bell Vernon is in the 3A bracket. We talked about Greater Latrobe with their thrilling victory in 4A, Ligonier Valley in 2A. And now we have to keep our fingers crossed because I don't know if you're going to know this off the top of your head. I don't, but
Probably
it
not.
Seems like just about every year we have had Westmoreland County teams playing for a title. And again, you look at it, it's going to be surprising, I think, if any of the teams other than Bell Vernon are able to make a run. And so you certainly, I think, if you're a Westmoreland fan, hope that the Leopards can live up to their billing.
Yeah, and I think they will. I do. I hope Dom's not watching. I don't think he is. But I do think that, again, we saw them against Elizabeth Ford, man. They just seem like they're peaking at the right time. Again, you hope that bye week didn't hurt anything in terms of that momentum. I don't think it did. I'm sure it just
first quarter will be big, no doubt.
Yeah, and I think so. I think they'll be okay, especially when you have the bye week and you're a number 1 seed. You play teams that are favorable. Let's put it that way. The matchup's a little more favorable for you. So, we'll see how it goes. But yeah, I think that they certainly have the best. Not really going on a limb by saying they have the best opportunity to make it to Acrisure.
Yeah, it's going to take some magic for Ligonier Valley or for Greater Latrobe, but those teams have already had historic accomplishments this season, so you can't write either one of them off. Ligonier Valley, its first ever WPIAL playoff win, and Greater Latrobe, the first since 1968.
And remember, the first time Latrobe played TJ this year in a conference game, 31-21. They only lost by 10 points, so we'll see if they can pull the upset.
Yeah, the Wildcats have been competitive even in their losses by and large this season, with the McKeesport game the exception, and a second half against Hempfield it kind of got away from them. But they've hung in there. And Ligonier Valley, this is a team that, under Roger Beitel, I know the players are much different. They're used to winning championships. 4 or 5 years ago, they were dominant in the Heritage Conference in District 6. So they've had plenty of postseason success. It's just a little different now in the WPIAL. Well, that's pretty much it for the high school coverage. I do want to touch on some good news, Flick.
Yeah.
We got to see a Seton Hill Griffins football victory at home, 7-0 against Mercyhurst. It was an ugly game, but defensively, one of the best performances that I think Seton Hill's ever had.
They were tremendous, and they've been really good on defense, but they were tremendous in that game. And Jalen McDuffie, who has just won like 3 or 4 awards this week.
He had 4.5 sacks. He deserves every award.
From numerous publications, outlets, and the PSAC. 4.5 sacks in the game. And he's just a beast. And we kind of knew that when he was a freshman. You could kind of see that coming. He just needed to put it together a little bit. Maybe he wasn't consistent enough. But he feasted on Mercyhurst's offensive line. And again, the defense has been put in such bad situations all year by the offense. It kind of happened again against Mercyhurst, but they were able to bow their necks and make some big stops, including a sack at the end.
Yeah, and so Seton Hill now avoids a last place finish, which I know, that's a minor victory, but one that Dan Day will take. They are 2-8. Mercyhurst also 2-8. You can go back and watch that one. If you're a fan of defense, I highly recommend it. They weren't the only Westmoreland County team in the college ranks to take care of business, though. Much opposite way that St. Vincent won. They put up 53 points, the Bearcats blowing out Waynesburg 53-6. I know TJ DeStefano was thrilled at that outcome. He was glued to his screen watching that game.
Yes.
St. Vincent now 4-5 has a chance to get to 500. And so the final week of the regular season for those teams on the horizon, Seton Hill will host Millersville in a cross PSAC matchup. We'll have that on Saturday at noon. And St. Vincent will host Bethany at 1:00. So both these teams have a chance to finish on a high note.
Yeah, we certainly hope the best. Both those guys are really good guys. And I don't just say that because Aaron Smetanka is a couple of doors down from me.
He could probably hear you right now.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. We've been, working with him for a long time, even when he was at GCC. And of course, Dan's the best. So you got to be really happy for them. That video of Dan, we put it up on Twitter and, obviously on the broadcast of him just screaming at the crowd, trying to get everybody, yelling and stuff. And then, Seton Hill makes that big defensive stop at the end and he's pointed at the crowd again. That's you. That's awesome. I just would love to see that in a season or a game that Seton Hill would actually be competing for a championship or something. That
I was going to say against
awesome.
Cal U or something.
Yeah, or IUP or a big upset. Not just an upset though, but a game that actually means something, and then you also pull the upset. So that that's what you kind of hope for in the future, and you just hope someday that Seton Hill can be involved in a game like that.
Well, I think we've covered all the games that we've been able to. So what final thoughts do you have? Again, we don't know what's going to happen, so we can't say for sure if this is our final show or not. But anything that you want to plug, anything you want to mention?
Well, the one thing that we can plan on doing, Sean, depending on what teams are left, even if we decide not to do a show, we can still do maybe an interview during the week with 1, 2, 3, whatever, how many coaches are left and kind of post it on YouTube. Not that I'm trying to give you something to do, but I think that might be a good idea. So people
we did that last year with both PT and Bell Vernon making the championships. Yep.
Yeah, that's right. So we can kind of continue that. We certainly appreciate, I got so many texts last week and a few emails as well asking, why aren't you guys broadcasting the games? And I explained it last week because of the exclusive rights agreement. We're prohibited from streaming to our own website. So unfortunately, we weren't able to, even though there were a lot of difficulties trying to watch the streams. We would have loved to have been there broadcasting, but unfortunately, we were not able to. So do give us a follow. Remember, on Twitter, on Facebook, Instagram, and on our scoreboard on our website, we keep up the scores throughout the night. So those 3 games that are happening on Friday will have up to second scores being updated on our website and on Twitter. So do give us a follow there. And if any of the teams make it to Acrashore, unfortunately can't broadcast it, but Sean and I will be there covering, and we certainly hope the best. Good luck to all the teams. Yeah.
By the way, Westmoreland alum Q&A this week, a football dose with Fitton Bros, the younger brother of Braden Bros. They play together at Delaware. So if you're a fan of Hempfield area football, certainly want to check that one out. And again, you mentioned it, Flick, Friday, we will have the preview for those 3 games, and then Friday night, we will recap that action as well. And believe it or not, it's just about to start basketball season for us. We've already been doing hockey broadcasts.
Oh, man, crazy.
As well. So the fall season winding to a close, but we've got plenty more to come all year round here on Westmoreland Sports Network. Well, again, possibly for the final time, we don't know. One thing we could say is thank you so much for tuning in. Thanks to our 3 head coaches, Ron Prady, Matt Humbert, and Roger Beitel from Greater Latrobe, Bell Vernon area, and Ligonier Valley taking the time. That'll do it for this edition of Westmoreland on the Gridiron. For Dan Flickinger, Sean Myers signing off saying thank you so much for tuning in right here on Westmoreland on the Gridiron.